What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Maynard Gaming. Today, we're going for the all-time high score on Call of Duty. Gonna see if we can get that tactical nuke. Gonna do some trick shots. Gonna see if I can level up my shotgun. Gonna be a good time. Be sure to drop a tip down at the bottom. Subscribe. Hit that little bell. I don't know all the others. Whatever. Okay. As you can tell, we're not doing this. It's a bit. Hey, it's funny, at least. So we're not actually playing Call of Duty, obviously. We are talking today about Romeo and Juliet, getting ready to hop into the prologue. The audio on this, first of all, I have to apologize because I promised you guys that this would be getting better in time, but the audio when I record my desktop isn't great. I went and I bought this fancy microphone. Look at this thing. And I have spent the last 2-3 days trying to get it to work, and I can't figure it out. This mic makes me feel like I'm a boomer. I feel like technology's working against me finally. I don't like it. But anyway, let's talk about the prologue. Okay, prologue, Romeo and Juliet, freshman English. First of all, what's a prologue? Got a definition there off the internet. A prologue is essentially the preface or introduction to a literary work. It's a speech often in verse addressed to the audience by an actor at the beginning of the play. So in Romeo and Juliet, before anything else happens, one of the actors would come out on stage. Oftentimes it's the Friar Lawrence character, who we'll get to in a couple weeks. Don't worry about that. But a character would come out on stage, and they would read this prologue aloud. And the prologue kind of previews things that are going to come in the story. So, Romeo and Juliet's prologue. Spoiler alert, but Shakespeare's prologue in Romeo and Juliet gives away pretty much the entire plot of the play. Just like trailers for upcoming movies, a prologue is designed to tease the audience, while also giving them a rough idea of what's going to occur in the play. But in his prologue, Shakespeare actually reveals the fate of his two title characters. He tells you what's going to happen to Romeo and Juliet. Why would he do this? Much like it is now, the end of the play was common knowledge to people in society at the time. Like, we haven't talked at all yet, really, about Romeo and Juliet. We spent a lot of time talking about sonnets, and I would imagine many of you already know what happens in the end of Romeo and Juliet. As you probably already know, they die. The play itself was an adaptation of a narrative poem written by Arthur Brooke entitled The Tragical History of Romeus and Juliet, which was published 32 years earlier. So, like I said, it was common knowledge for people in society. They already knew what this story was about and kind of what became of these characters. So if we already know, why bother? Just because the audience knows how the play ends, that doesn't mean that they already understand how the characters got to that point. Like, there's still some mystery to this. So think about how many movies employ this technique, modern movies, beginning with a scene that comes at the end of the story, which makes the audience wonder, like, how did this character get to this point in their lives? Like, you know those movies that start with something chaotic happening, everything freezes, and then some narration goes like, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got in this position. And then it goes like 2 weeks earlier and goes backwards. So that's essentially the point. We meet two well-intentioned teenagers and know that every single decision that Romeo and Juliet make pushes them one step closer to their deaths. Which, yeah, is morbid, like it says at the bottom, but it's also fascinating. It's like watching a horror movie. That's what I always compare it to. When you're yelling at the TV, telling the characters to stop making dumb decisions, but you can't get through to them. That's what Romeo and Juliet's like to me. You know these two kids are making dumb decisions, but you can't stop them. So let's translate this thing. Found a meme on the internet, and I had to fix it because it said 30%. There's a 100% chance that these two idiots are going to die. Prologue. I don't know if you guys can see this, because my little picture-in-picture thing is kind of covering it. Can I grab that? Nope. Alright, well, fortunately, I already know it. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and continuance of their parents' rage, which not for their children's end could not remove, is now the 2 hours' traffic of our stage. The which, if you with patient ears attend, what here shall miss, our toils shall strive to mend. Fun fact, if you were to break this thing down, which we're not going to do in full detail here, it's a sonnet, just like we already looked at. The prologue itself, it's 14 lines. It follows that same rhyme scheme that Shakespeare's other sonnets do, and we could break it apart. for poetry, but we're going to look at it more for facts, for plot. First line, 2 households, both alike in dignity. Translation, there's 2 families, and they're both respectable. This is a story about the Capulets and the Montagues. Guess what? Romeo's from one, Juliet's from the other. And sometimes kids are like, oh man, how am I going to remember who's from what? One of them rhymes. Juliet, Capulet, that rhymes. Montague, Romeo, Montague, not so much, but Capulet, Juliet. So 2 families that are both respectable. In fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Translation, it's in Verona, Italy. That's where the story takes place. There's a little idea of what Verona looks like. From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny. The 2 families' long-standing feud sparks into new violence, new levels of violence as the play opens here. And Romeo and Juliet has been told and retold a million times, and sometimes they keep it set in, Elizabethan era Verona, Italy, and then other times, like the picture on the bottom right down there, they'll reset it in modern day. So that one's from the 1996 Romeo and Juliet movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and in that one, instead of having swords, they had guns. There was a poster for that in my classroom, if you guys remember, over by the tournament. Where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Translation, where citizens stain their hands with their own neighbor's blood. So this strife, this drama is affecting people across the town on both sides. It's basically like gang warfare. It's like, you could think of this as like Romeo and Juliet or like the Bloods and the Crips. It's the same idea. It's gang warfare. From forth the fatal loins of these 2 foes. So born to these 2 feuding families, you have 2 babies. One was Romeo, one was Juliet, and then 15, 20 years passes. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Translation, 2 doomed lovers end their own lives. So that's the spoiler here, is that in the end, these 2 lovers, they're not going to make it, and it's going to be their own doing. Press F to pay your respects. Whose misadventured piteous overthrows. Translation, these 2 lovers, their unfortunate fates, continuing on to the next line, doth with their death bury their parents' strife. Romeo and Juliet's deaths, they finally put an end to their parents' feud. So this ongoing, never-ending feud could only be stopped when their 2 children, unfortunately, pass away. The fearful passage of their death-marked love, the unfortunate events that led to their deaths, and the continuance of their parents' rage, the never-ending hatred between their parents, the which but their children's end not could remove, which couldn't be stopped without their tragic deaths, as it says, their rip, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage, will be performed live on stage over the next 2 hours. For us, it's going to take 2 months, because we're doing it 1 scene at a time, essentially. But over 2 hours, they would describe this whole scene, the whole thing described in the prologue. The which, if you with patient ears attend, and if you pay attention closely to the play, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend. Whatever the prologue didn't cover, the actors will attempt to show over the next 2 hours, essentially. So, Romeo and Juliet, guys, coming soon. That's the whole prologue. Soon means Monday. We're going to start Act 1, Scene 1 on Monday. You guys have one short assignment attached to this, which will be to summarize the play in basically very little space. Like, you got to condense it down. So go over to Canvas. You can find it in announcements or the Week 13 module. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.